This episode of The Biggest Table is brought to you in part by Wild Goose Coffee. Since 2008, Wild Goose has sought to build better communities through coffee. For our listeners, Wild Goose is offering a special promotion of 20% off a one-time order using the code TABLE at checkout. To learn more and to order coffee, please visit wildgoosecoffee.com. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Margot Finn. Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Biggest Table. I am your host, Andrew Camp, and in this podcast, we explore the table, food, eating, and hospitality as an arena for experiencing God's love and our love for one another. And today, I'm joined by Margot Finn. Margot holds an MA and PhD in American culture, focusing on food studies, media studies, and 20th century U.S. history. As a lecturer in applied liberal arts and affiliate of the Sustainable Food Systems Initiative at the University of Michigan, Margot seeks to help students integrate the many different academic disciplines they encounter in their liberal arts degrees and connect their academic work to their personal lives. She encourages students to develop critical thinking skills and more informed perspectives on contemporary food debates, such as the ecological impact of organic versus conventional agriculture, local versus imported foods, the biology and culture of fatness, immigrant labor in the food system, and the history of elite food reform efforts. So thanks for joining me today, Margot. Really looking forward to our conversation.
Thanks so much for inviting me.
Yeah, so I came across your work through when I was interviewing Mark Johnson on American Bacon, and he referenced your book, Discriminating Taste, and it intrigued me. And so I, like a good podcaster, I got to follow the rabbit trails and see where things lead and who's writing interesting things. And so your book definitely piqued an interest and is a great look at where we are in this modern food revolution. So I appreciate your work.
Thank you. That's really kind.
So before we get into your work, Discriminating Taste, like what led you down this path towards food and food studies and sort of this interest in this modern food revolution?
Sure. I mean, I came to grad school thinking I was going to study the reception of U.S. media in the Middle East. That was like my good, serious 20-something project that I thought was going to, and it was like a really post 9/11 project. Trying to figure out, the more academic answer to that question some people were asking, like, why do they hate us? And like, I didn't think it was such a mystery, but I didn't want to. But there was a mystery in like, okay, what is hated about whatever it is we represent? What does America look like from the outside? And also, I'd heard about these interesting scenes of like people tearing down posters of Britney Spears, which it's interesting that the posters of Britney Spears were there in the first place. It's interesting that they get torn down and I was interested in all of that. But I tried to learn Arabic, and I don't know if you've tried, it's hard.
Yes.
And I was trying and also trying to master critical theory and doing the whole grad school thing and realizing that if I persisted in this project to do ethnographic reception work on the reception of U.S. media, it was going to take me 10 years to maybe be fluent in the language that people didn't even speak, the not vernacular,
Right.
And I didn't want to be in grad school forever. So I was going to leave and be a sommelier because the only worldly experience I had ever had outside of academia was food service. I was pretty good at it, and thought like, okay, I can translate this into something with a little more status and a little bit of, I can do some book learning around this and I'll be a wine expert. And then I can do food service, but it'll seem like a career,
Right.
And my grad school advisor was a little bit like, well, okay, you would probably have fun as a sommelier in New York City for a few years, and then you're going to get sick of working nights and weekends, and what then? Because he good dadded me, basically.
Right.
And he was like, why don't you just write a dissertation first, sweetheart? And that sounded reasonable. I was like, okay, Dad.
Yeah. Nobody's ever said that. I've never heard somebody say that the reasonable thing to do is write a dissertation.
It's kind of that. And honestly, I think we've gone back and forth, him and I, over the years about whether or not this was like good practical advice. But it was, I will say, loving advice for me, because he saw that I really wanted to live in libraries forever and that there was a route there and that if I could take a swing at it, I should.
Right.
So So, but it was like, okay, so not U.S. media in the Middle East. What are we going to do here? And he was like, well, you're interested in food. Go find out why we went from the cocktail hour to the wine and cheese reception and see if there's something in that. And I was like,
Right.
you're not going to let me do this, but okay, I'll let me go. And, kind of like opened the door into, like, I went to a food studies conference and found my people.
Right.
Academically. They were so welcoming, and there were all these questions that it turned out it was valid to ask, and nobody
Hmm.
made fun of me for asking. And I had been fascinated by food and interested in food a long time. I just didn't know that there was a home for that in academia.
Right.
But then I got lucky.
Then you got lucky. And so here we are. And so you've written this book, Discriminating Taste, the subtitle being How Class Anxiety Created the American Food Revolution. And so there's some modern ideas of what the food revolution encapsulates. And so before we, get into your thesis, like what are the common understandings of how we got to this modern food revolution where kale is now seen as the ubiquitous vegetable for us all to eat?
Oh, I love that way of putting that question. Yeah, and that, I mean, to me, it kind of seemed like common sense, I guess, when I came at these questions of like, well, how did I learn that I should be thin, and that was what was important for people to be healthy, and how did I learn that organic vegetables were better for the environment, and a good, virtuous person eats free-range eggs? Like, where did those ideas came from? Because those seem like common sense, you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
So I think I don't even know if there's like I give names to these different stories in my books, but I think for most of people, this is how ideologically hegemonic, to give it the big academic term,
Yeah.
ideas are. They're the air we breathe. They feel like common sense. We might have multiple different ideas about why they're good, but usually their goodness is kind of uninterrogated. These are
Hmm.
it's just the air we breathe. This is the stuff I want. This is the stuff I don't want. And media scholars, lots of people look at these from different ways. Media scholars often look at advertisements because those are where we can, I guess, pull back the curtain a little bit because somebody is speaking to our desires. So when we see what an advertiser is speaking to, then we go, oh, well, that's something that people want. And then we can start asking questions about, okay, so why do people want fresh food at this particular moment, when at other moments we can see that people saw fresh food as dangerous and scary and likely to carry pathogens, something
Right.
people are coming to a different awareness of again.
Yeah. And so your book talks that, really the modern contemporary food revolution began, in the late 70s, early 80s with the divergence of great wealth. So as we saw a spike in the super wealthy, we see a spike in this modern food revolution. And so
Where
explain,
did that
unpack,
icon come?
where,
Sure. Well, I think the place where that idea came from really is not from this latest. So I did start looking for that moment of like, okay, so how did I learn that food was this and that? And
yeah,
many of those ideas seem to become mainstream in the 1980s. But when I looked further back at like, so when did we learn really about weight loss? Well, there was a real big craze for weight loss dieting popularly in the 1920s.
hmm,
So I couldn't just look back to, well, it wasn't the 1980s when we learned that thinness was good, but instead there were these earlier moments where weight loss dieting was popular, and then it was not so popular for a good amount of time. And the more I looked into a lot of the things that I had come to understand as unquestionably, unproblematically good and good for all time had become good around the time I was a child, became ascendant in my adulthood, but they had this earlier moment in the 1920s where
hmm,
many of those things were good, especially for the upper middle class women who were defining what was goodness in food at that time.
wow,
And that's, I think, where class started to seem a little bit like, oh, maybe this is part of the equation, when it was not everybody eating in these ways that seemed very familiar to me, wanting natural food that was pure, wanting weight loss dieting, wanting ethnic foods, and wanting to have Japanese teas that would be very authentic. There were all of these ways that the upper middle class was eating in the 1920s that felt very recognizable to me as the ways that I was trying to eat as a good, virtuous middle class striver in circa 2005, right?
right,
Michael Pollan rhymed with Upton Sinclair in this way that, and then it was kind of the mid-century that had to be explained. And one thing that I knew coming from an American studies background was that the mid-century was very weird in a lot of ways, that there was a middle class consolidation of power and status that we had not seen before or since.
Right. And so I came across this work from another guy about like America's special century from 1870 to 1970, and that the
Mm.
GDP growth, we saw in crazy amounts of GDP growth at like 3%, he said, that we're not going to see again because it was special, right? But so does GDP growth, when we see higher GDP growth, does that coincide with a less posturing of the middle class to get food? Or like, because you write that, really when the middle class is flourishing, there's less of a posturing for eating well. Whereas when GDP, when there is this big dichotomy, the middle class really wants to posture themselves as something better.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what I would say is it's two things. You need GDP growth, and you also need that growth to be shared. So we had high GDP growth, and that's interesting, that kind of 1870 to 1970
Yeah.
periodization. I would say you but that earlier moment in the 1920s, you also had great inequality. So it's not just GDP growth; it's also how broadly it's being shared. And
Okay.
I think in that earlier period, 1880 to 1920 in particular, you also saw vast inequality, and so that's where you get people striving for symbolic forms of status. And I think that's what we see again in the 1980s when the middle class starts to stagnate. So what's special really is that period after the Great Depression, when the New Deal and all kinds of labor organization, lots of forces work to make the middle class more powerful. And then in the 70s and 80s, when that starts to sunset, then I think you see people starting to do the symbolic aspiration again. So it is GDP linked, but it's even more closely linked to inequality.
Inequality. Right. Because then we have this post World War II thing where like eating becomes this like, we want the processed canned food, like processed food elevates, and so we, you write that in the Gilded Age, we see a growth in eating well, and then post World War II things revert. So we're not looking at a progress. If this was purely progressional, we would continue to progress, and yet post World War II we see a reversion back to something. um
Well, it's interesting. By our current values, it does look like regression. I would say that they came to value different things. So
yeah.
in the vast kind of in the 30s to the 70s, instead, having ample food was really important. Having food that was consistent,
Hmm.
reliable, that could please everybody, things that everybody could have. So the idea of plain things.
Right.
You got surveys where people would say what they most wanted, their ideal meal would be plain roast chicken and a plain Manhattan. This is luxury, but it's luxury that's not as aspiring to be different, right? As
Hmm.
opposed to something like filet mignon and fancy wine, right? Like
Right.
there even the ways that people were framing luxury in that period were wanting to be like everybody instead of wanting to be different. So I don't think I think it's more that you see a change in what people see as good and desirable, and whether or not differentiation itself is good and desirable.
Yeah, that's interesting because taste is such a weird phenomenon in and of itself. And I've been reading a book on flavor, and you point out some stuff like flavor, like good taste is a weird phenomenon that is not just, it's not inherent, it's learned, it's cultural. And so, like, what you're aiming at describing is that my love of a premier cru burgundy may have less to do with inherent goodness in the wine and maybe a posturing of me wanting to look better than I might actually be.
Well, and what's fascinating is it turns out that if you think that wine is more expensive, you will think it tastes better. We
Right.
know this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And we know that even people who rate wines as a profession are no better than chance when it comes to identifying. So something else must be going on there, because we also know that wine is available at vastly different price points and means different things to different people, and means something different than Budweiser.
It does. And you even point out the study that just blew my mind of that they got, the study from in France where they gathered university professors from the wine college, and they had them sniff a red and a white, and then they came back and they dyed the white wine red, and people described it as a red wine, even though, like, what is going on with taste and flavor then?
Oh, many things. I mean, the brain is weird and wacky, right?
Right.
Like, um, so I would say that context matters a whole lot, and that's not crazy. We're social creatures, and we often eat in social environments, and we take cues from other people to tell us whether or not what we're experiencing is good, bad, or other, right?
Right.
So of course these things matter, and also our experience of taste is going to be influenced by those things. So almost everybody has had the experience of tasting something that they don't like at first, and then over time they come to like it. Maybe they even come to really like it. This is
Mm-hmm.
particularly true of things that are bitter or fermented foods, cheeses, pickles. Um, Most people on their first encounter with things like sauerkraut and gefilte fish and tea, even anything that's got smoky flavoring, all of these things they're challenging and they require repeat stimulus. But
Right.
you can acquire them, and then those tastes that get acquired have all kinds of associations, right? Sometimes very often the hardest to acquire tastes get associated with maturity and masculinity and expertise. So I mean, I hope you're already thinking about things like Scotch and
Yeah.
really hoppy IPAs and all of these things are blue cheese, right? Super funky, weird flavors that we don't expect children to like, that take a lot of exposure to decide is good food instead of something that would poison me,
Right.
right? Which
Yeah.
bitter and funky smells often are in nature. So this is like it's like a mark of how we get acculturated into eating the vast array of things omnivores can eat.
So you just keep, I just thought I was a better person because I loved my Scotch and I loved Epoisse blue cheese or Epoisse cheese and I like blue cheese. But, as I study food more, these are learned behaviors, and it's wrapped up in culture and posturing at times and sort of these four ideas. You talk about the four ideals of the food revolution of sophistication, thinness, purity, and cosmopolitan. And so, yeah, like okay, so where we've talked about a little flavor and I love just talking to people about food. And so we're just, so like, where are we in this food revolution and what are these ideals that, sort of guide, but at the same time contradict each other?
Yeah, that's a great. So I came up with these four mostly as a way to just conceptually organize. My kitty wants to join us. This is Mystery. Um, and she's sweet and shy. Once she realizes that she's on camera, she may disappear. And
Yeah.
oh, you didn't want to be part of that, sweetie. Well, um, so the four pillars were, I think I was, as I was trying to figure out this morass of here's all these ideas about how to eat better. And then anytime I went to scratch under the surface of one, it turned out like not only was it not new, mostly they had this moment in the 20s, and then they mostly weren't actually better, right? All the reasons that I had been told about why they were better fell apart on very cursory kind of examination, which made me realize, like, okay, actually, I wasn't convinced by evidence that these things were better anyway. So starting to look at, okay, where do these things come from? And so really to simplify it for myself, divided into the things that I felt I was aspiring to. The idea of sophistication or gourmetness, this idea that I had to know about fancy foods, had to know about French foods, the
Right.
names of foods. And not because they were, and not like not to learn about other people way, but because these were what rich people were supposed to know about, right? I could see that was status. That was the easiest one to see status. But then even with weight loss, as I learned more about where the ideal of thinness came from, who had been involved in weight loss dieting, who had resisted weight loss dieting, it was one way less evidence based than I had been led to believe.
Right.
Um, and also very much again a project of elite white women that was more about distinguishing themselves in terms of aesthetics and this imagined virtue than it was really about doing anything for anybody's health. um Natural food was interesting in part because I felt very tied to that movement because of ecological reasons. I was vegan for a while. I tried to eat local food, was very into Michael Pollan for a while.
Right.
um and then to find out that most of the arguments that were being made in favor of these things were not real or valid, that they were not better, and also to realize that I had not started doing these things because of any good reason, right? Somebody had given me a real flimsy story and I had been like, oh yes, I think that corn is definitely the devil. you
Yeah.
know?
Right.
Um, um, so I guess I was interrogating my own beliefs and finding that there was not much there, but underneath each of them, I could see the desire for virtue, the desire for distinction. I could see middle class practices. I could see the virtues that I had grown up with, which I don't want to demonize. I think the idea of trying to use information to make things better is a real good thing. And the idea that we could maybe deny ourselves some things right now so as to have better things in the future. These are not bad in and of themselves. But when there's stories that you believe in and refer to because they're habits for you and not because they're necessarily a real practice that's going to improve anything in the world, well, then I think we're putting our energy in the wrong place. So I guess that's where the four pillars came from. They were
Yeah.
from me, truly.
Right.
They were what organized my own eating. And then as I interrogated each of them, it turned out they were not new, not better, and not doing the things that I wanted them to, but they were marking me very clearly in terms of my class.
Hmm. And that's where I think I've struggled with, is somebody who has lived and breathed in this food world and understanding food and the table and the power it has to shape us for good and the power it has to bring us together, but then also the ills of, factory farming. And so I'm caught in this place of like, okay, budgetarily, where can I put my resources as a middle class, guy trying to support a family? And then also how do we feed everyone? And so like if I want to shop at farmers markets, that's fine. It indicates a place of privilege for myself. But not everyone has access to that. And so like where like in this tug and pull of how do we take care of the earth ecologically and at the same time feeding everyone, it's this tug and pull of like, okay, what do I do? um and that's the tension I feel, and I've even talked to some friends about it, and we feel it of like, okay, like there's not a good answer to any one question, and yet it feels at times the white middle class, upper class wants to tell us, no, if we just all get rid of factory farming, we'll be better and life will be better and we'll take care of the earth. And it may be, who knows? I don't know. But like, here we are in this tension of how do I even eat?
Yeah, and if there's anything I would tell people, it's that they can calm down and realize that it's not on them and they can't personally fix anything, right?
No, right.
Um,
Yeah.
and there's a little bit of, I think there's a little bit of it's attractive to middle class drivers too, right? That I can work hard and fix it. Not in this case. Sometimes this needs to be about, policies that are above us. The decisions that people make about what fossil fuels get used and how, and whether or not we're going to have renewable energy, that's beyond us,
Right.
beyond me, and no
Yeah.
decision that I make about what to buy. But it is useful to me to know that many pesticides that are used by organic certified farmers are not better for the environment. In fact, many of them are less effective and or worse for downstream life. But
Hmm.
the way we do organic certification is a problem, that we've decided that organic just means not synthetic.
Right.
And that's not better. That's
No.
just not synthetic, right?
Right. And it usually comes with a cost of an arm and a leg that, some people can't afford.
And it may not actually be organic anyway. There
Yeah.
was a great NerdWallet investigation into organic pineapple. I don't know if you know that one, but I
No.
mean, the amount of organic pineapples imported from Costa Rica far exceeds the amount of pineapples that organic pineapple growers in Costa Rica could produce. So there's fraud somewhere.
Yeah.
But where is a
Right.
really good question. Are the pineapples organic or not? Some of them are not, and they're being labeled organic. But then the deeper question maybe is, does it matter, right? Are there more residues of pesticides that matter for consumers or anybody else on the pineapples? And there aren't, so there's really no way to tell. So we know that some of these pineapples are not organic, but we'll never be able to tell which ones.
Right.
So so when you think you're buying organic and that's better for anybody, I tend to think about the Costa Rican pineapples.
Well, and I even remember even from Michael Pollan's book, The Omnivore's Dilemma, he points out that, trying to buy organic asparagus from Whole Foods that's been flown in from, a faraway country, is that any better than buying inorganic or not organic asparagus, from another place? Because you're still dealing with the fossil fuels and all the crazy,
Well, and there's no way out. There's truly
no.
no way out of that, right? Because even small farms have to, and the delivery system to small farms actually means there's more total miles involved in local also. So you're
Right.
not saving the fossil fuels that you think that you're saving by buying the inefficient produce from the farmer down the road.
Gosh, it's like, and so we feel trapped, and yet there's part of me, we didn't talk about this beforehand. My day job is I sell wine. I distribute wine, for a small distributor, and most of our wines are small boutique, family-owned wineries that I I want to believe now after, talking with you and reading your book, I may, you have me questioning my whole life existence, but like, that wanting to buy from them and drink their wines versus the mass-produced Josh Cellars or Mayomi, just to pick on them, right or wrong. You know, like I feel better about myself and it feels like I'm doing something better. And I want to believe that the wine is better because they care about the craft. But again, based on flavor and studies of flavor, it may just be a story I want to tell myself. And so like it is there anything like should I just throw my arms up and buy Mayomi and Josh and or like is there still worth pursuing
Not if
something
stories
good?
matter to you.
Hmm.
I
Say
I
more.
mean, so the idea that it's just a story, but everything's a story.
Story.
I
Right.
don't I don't think that it's just a story is actually small.
No.
It may in fact be that you know the person who makes the wine and that they go about it in a particular way that you find admirable, whether or not it makes the taste better, is worth it. Like
Right.
that whole thing, start to finish, might be really worth it, and it can be, and it doesn't actually have to taste better, is I think, or it wouldn't have to taste better to somebody who doesn't care about that story.
Hmm.
Maybe it's a little bit like the communion wafer, right? Like nobody else has to, it doesn't have to mean anything to anybody else if it means something in your mouth.
Hmm. I love that because the story does matter and like the the art does matter. The craft still matters because buying we would say buying an art piece from a local artist is better than going to Hobby Lobby, you know. Uh,
If it is for you, right?
right. Yeah, that's
But if
true.
you're decorating an Airbnb, maybe you go to Hobby Lobby and don't invest so much. Like maybe
Yeah,
you even have different contexts, right?
that's true. Yeah, and I was even talking with a friend long ago, or not long ago, but we were talking about wine and we were drinking a Mayomi side by side with like a Willamette single vineyard Pinot Noir. Very different, but we both were like, okay, if Mayomi helps you start a journey to love something, is that inherently bad? No. If you stay there because that's, maybe, but can you grow to appreciate, you know, something nuanced or different? Um, so,
But do you even need to, right? Like it's, I think I would draw it back even to
oh,
like if Thomas Kincaid is the way that you want to decorate, thumbs up. Because if you like it, then you like
you
it.
like,
You know?
okay, that's fair. Yeah. Like if, yeah. So really it's coming down to like, okay, what do I love and can I embrace my journey and my story versus being informed by what the elites want to tell me is good.
Yeah. Although we are so attuned to status, and I think it's okay for us to, I mean, we can
Yeah,
check that in ourselves and decide
right.
when we don't want to invest in that. But that we would have our tastes caught up inexorably in a whole system of judgment about where we fall is like we're primates. That's what we do.
Yeah.
You know?
No. Yeah, we do care about status and you know, as a wine seller, I do care about these finer wines and I want to sell, the cheaper ones because that moves sales a little bit, but I also want to represent the finer brands too. And I never consider it a bad day when I get to drink champagne or, single vineyard Burgundy, right?
See, so it's, I think there is some part of, but I think it's tough because we also feel a lot of both shame and guilt about status distinctions, making
Yeah.
them and experiencing them made about us. there's a real sense, and it's funny to me that it's like there's no comfortable place to sit when it comes to class status, right? Because
Right.
even to be in higher, then you're a snob, or like elite is a slur. Like there's all the,
Yeah.
again, there's no, you can be sneered down at, you can be sneered up at. There's just no comfortable. We're deeply uncomfortable with it, even as we're very invested in where are we and how do we sit relative to other people. So it's a very uncomfortable thing for us to both always be part of and like conscious of and aware of, and also have to try and tell people like, you don't have to care about that. You do, you're going to, but
You're
you
right.
can try and turn the dial down if it's not making you happy,
Hmm. I, yeah, this conversation's gone a different place than I thought it would. And I love it just because I think we are so caught up in, okay, what should we eat? How should we eat it? Who should we eat it with? And really you're inviting us to say, okay, like those matter. But at the end of the day, like you have to come to grips with your own story and be comfortable in your own skin and live that way as best as we're able to.
Knowing it's imperfect,
Yeah. Yeah. And so we'll like what we like. Hopefully we don't get stuck in what we like, and we can not, because there is the temptation just to hunker down and just never experience anything beyond, whether
Well,
that's,
there's that, but we're also very exploratory. I love this
yeah.
the idea of the biggest table. I think my goal, or the thing that makes me uncomfortable about the way the food revolution was exclusionary, and I think still is to some degree, but not all and in all ways.
Yeah.
I don't like the idea that somebody might be made to be uncomfortable by not knowing or not already buying into a particular kind of aesthetic or ideology, especially when those aesthetic and ideologies are often based on lies, which they
Right.
are.
Yes.
Right. So and we all want to avoid that, I think.
Right.
Nobody wants to be judging people, especially based on false ideas about what's better and worse. And but it makes people so uncomfortable that they've been doing that it's like, I don't know, how do we get to a place where it can really just be like, it's okay if you want to bring your KFC into this urban garden, that's fine, it's not wrong or unwelcome in any more than it would be wrong for us to take this, salad of locally harvested greens into a picnic table at a cafeteria, right? Like,
Right.
can we all mix and give people options and then be okay with whatever people choose, even when it's Jello and KFC and Kraft Dinner?
Mm-hmm. And yet with the food revolution, like you said, it is this space of judgment or elitism. And so like, has this food revolution brought anything good? Like where is there some goodness?
Oh, well, I love the aesthetics. I don't know about
Yeah.
you, but I love a farmer's market and an urban garden, just like many people do. And I think more green spaces in cities is absolutely essential to people's well-being. I would like to see it happen a little bit bigger infrastructurally. I think the problem with a lot of urban farms and gardens is that they get abandoned very quickly,
Hmm.
and that's not good for it, right? Like once you have, it takes a lot of labor and infrastructure to create, and then when they go fallow within a few years, which is the typical kind of life cycle of these things, that again, it doesn't benefit anybody. I would like to see more tree planting in cities. In the neighborhoods that need urban gardens, probably an actual tree canopy would go a lot further towards making it possible for people to be outside among their neighbors. So if there's something that I really love about urban gardens, it's that they sometimes were at least temporary oases where you could get away from the city heat and be around your neighbors in a beautiful place and maybe share some food that was grown there. The food, I think, is like 10th on the list of the things that those spaces might do for a community.
Hmm. No, that makes sense because, again, if the goal is to bring people together and to help, nourish people in a flourishing moment where we care about more than just what they eat, but about the flourishing of their whole life. What purpose does a garden serve? Is an important question to ask of like, how does this help people flourish versus how does this help people eat better? Uh,
And I don't think urban gardens are really a very good answer to making people eat very differently. It doesn't seem like the research suggests that they are. It doesn't seem
okay.
like a practice
Yeah.
suggests that they are. But can they be really nice gathering spaces? And is that important? I think so. But we might need to structure and maintain them differently if that's our goal.
Interesting. Yeah. And so then your book came out in 2017. We're almost 10 years post publication, and a lot has changed. you know in 10 years. And so like what have you seen over the past 10 years, or what might you add conversationally, like, where we are? Obviously the class distinctions have only, amplified. Elon Musk being the first trillionaire, like there's something
Sure.
wrong, inherently wrong. Personally, I think with a trillionaire, but, here we are.
Oh, that's so interesting. I do think so. A number of things have things have changed and then they haven't. I still get students who believe, it's funny, students' beliefs haven't changed, right? Like 10 years ago, I started out with like, okay, so organic isn't really better, local isn't really better, weight loss isn't really the key to health or better. And students it was just like, what? Everything I've been told is wrong. Okay, that's still the same. People are still coming into my classroom with exactly the same beliefs, but they're much easier to get under now.
Hmm.
I teach an entire class on obesity, and it used to be we would spend the first 8 weeks getting people to the point of being like, okay, so maybe fatness isn't the worst, but we still should probably fix it, right? Like that's where I could get people, And by the end
Right.
of the semester, it went a mix. Now it's like after week 2, they're like, oh, yep, turns out it's all bullshit. Okay, now so how and now what? And
Yeah.
and so I've had to adjust to maybe I'm better at some things too. I don't know. There's like many things that have changed, but one of the things that has changed is people are much more willing to believe that everything that they've been told is wrong.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
That is
And
interesting.
and especially on fatness.
Hmm.
I do think some part of it is fat activists and health at every size. People have made a little bit of a dent. That there's been a little bit, and like with Lizzo, there was some kind of public awareness around questions about whether fatness was so bad. But somehow that one has fallen apart more. I think COVID did some of it. I
Really?
think that changed how people feel about health in general, and whether or not fatness is the worst.
Hmm.
That's foggy though. I have
Right.
a sense that COVID changed something around fatness in particular, but also that was declining as it was. What else has changed? People care a lot less. There was a while where food was just everywhere. And I mean, that was the Michael Pollan moment, right? And like,
Right.
and farmers markets, and there was all of this. And then I was a real wet blanket because I just kept saying, well, it's not really better. And I'm like, yes, yeah, food. Yeah, yes, food, but
Yeah.
no, not the way you're doing it. Um, it's much less loud and intense, and people
Hmm.
are now, the people who are still doing that kind of thing are sort of lagging and hangers on, and there's just a different energy, and the fact that there's questions about it is not so new, so I feel much less novel and less shocking and less like a wet blanket all the time, and
Right.
more like I'm the person you go to when you're past your nihilism crisis and you want to go play in the playground of the aftermath. I'm there, and I've been there for a little bit, and it's fun, and we eat pixie sticks and also kale, both.
Right.
you
Yeah.
know.
S-
So those are some of the things that have changed.
So what are we seeing in food studies then? Like where is food studies moving
Oh, that's a great
towards,
question.
and what, it's more for my curiosity's sake of like, okay, like what are people, like you and Mark saying about like, where is food headed?
Oh gosh, I don't know where food is headed. And
No.
he and I are both historians, or I'm not a historian. I was raised by
Yeah.
historians, so we're reluctant to predict the future. I will say I have real fears about what I'm seeing with the cyclospora outbreak, regarding our food safety system. I thought
Hmm.
that somewhere there were adults still in charge, and now I'm really feeling like maybe that's not the case. So some concerns about our overall national food health and safety infrastructure. But that aside, food studies, I don't even know if I have a good picture on the field at this moment. My sense is that it's maturing to the point of differentiation. So people are, and this I guess happens in a lot of fields. There's more balkanization, and there is even institutionally, we're seeing a splitting apart of the people who do agriculture stuff, and the nutrition stuff people didn't ever really come to play as much anyway. But the ag people and then the history culture people are splitting somewhat, in part because the agriculture people are really US based and US centered. Something like 80 to 90% of their organization is US, and
Okay.
only 60% of the cultural studies side is US based, with
Hmm.
40% of our membership elsewhere.
Okay.
So we've met together, but not even forever, like 20 years we've been meeting together somewhere in the US. It no longer makes as much sense for North America to be the sole annual meeting place for particularly the cultural studies side. So that's going to be more, this next year, they're doing 6, I think, meetings around the world. One will be in New York, but a number of them will be somewhere in the global South, which is good, but also a challenge in terms of thinking of how many of these are anybody going to actually get to. And so, again, maybe that's a long way of saying parts of the organization, especially the parts that are not as focused on agriculture, are becoming much more international in focus, which is great
Yeah.
because historically the focus of food studies has been really kind of US and insular, and I'm part of the problem in that domain, and so is Mark. But it's becoming broader, and then that's making it much harder to track where people are and what people are doing, which is probably a good thing for the literature, but a bad thing for anybody knowing what's going on.
No, that makes sense. And, I think, yeah, again, you may be part of the problem, but you tell the story of where you are and you're situated, and you can't tell the whole, you can't tell the global
It's true.
story, and so again, you are where you are. And much like you said with the table, like, bring your KFC, bring your, and hopefully we learn from each other.
Yeah, I'll bring the American cheese. Somebody else can bring like the salad.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yes. We need the French cheeses. We need the American cheeses. We need it. We need it all. The more cheese, the better, in my opinion.
Yeah, amen to that. And lactose intolerant people will get you too.
Yes, we'll get you too. But you do help, in the midst of where we are and making sense and questioning these narratives, you do end your conclusion in the book with sort of some ideas of, okay, is there a path forward, or how do we, given the tension we face, and, damned if we do, damned if we don't, times, the way I feel sometimes, like, what can we do? And so, like, how can we move more in a healthy, maybe robust, I don't know the right word, but, in a more true sense in this food narrative?
That is, yeah, I think there must be. But would you you may
Yeah.
have read
So
these more recently. What do I say we should do? 10 years ago, what did I think?
you said we should be more critical of the food narrative. So question, we should question it. Reform efforts must include input of the target population. So if we're going to, in my instance, the Navajo Nation is close by. And so if we want to address food insecurity in the Navajo Nation, it behooves us to actually talk to the Navajo Nation before implementing programs. And then aim to cultivate a greater awareness and tolerance about how class difference shapes taste. So again, I think the last two go
Endorse
hand.
all of those.
Yeah. No, they were really helpful. And I was like, oh, like this is like really, we've been critical of the food narratives. And so if we're aiming to look at fixing hunger and food scarcity and food deserts, which I think is a worthwhile goal that we can and should aim towards, we need to not do it from a white privileged perspective. But then as a white middle class male my whole life, like I should be akin and clued in to how the foods I eat have shaped me more than I care to admit, and that what Latino neighbors or indigenous friends eat, can we be open to their expressions?
That's awesome. That all sounds like exactly what I want for people to do. And the nothing about us without us, I get that from disability studies. And I think it's just crucial in so many realms,
Right.
And it's true in education, right? Like, could we involve children in telling us what they need and then really listen to them and give it to them? Could we involve the parishioners of any church in telling us what they need and just really listen? And there's just, like if we just listen to people, they will tell us. And if people are telling us, I don't really need more locally grown vegetables, what I need is money, oh my God, give it to them. That's
Right.
really what they need. And will they eat better? Yeah, they will, because they'll have time to eat the way they want to eat, and that will be better for them.
Yeah. Well, I interviewed somebody from I did a hunger series like last year and got to interview somebody from Bread for the World. And, she talked about the fact that during COVID, when people were given, money to buy food, they actually, like, we saw child hunger rates go down. Like, So people spent the money as we thought they should, and we're responsible human beings to take care of their kids. And so, like, giving people the means to actually buy the food they need, they'll actually do it.
We find this timing and microfinance, right? The lesson has always been, oh my God, give money to women.
Yeah.
They spend it on really good things for their families. They build businesses out of a single cow. They feed their children. All kinds of good things happen when you give money to people who need it.
Yep. And so as we think about the table, what's the story you would like the table to tell?
Well, I mean, I do think bigger is like we can be more inclusive. Warren Belasco, who one of my mentors, has this beautiful metaphor that he starts off his book Meals to Come with, where, and I don't even know if this comes from him, but the idea that if you're trying to feed a lot of people, you've got a few options. You can either bake a bigger pie. This is the cornucopian option, right? The idea that we could always have more and more and more. Or you can kill some of the people. That's the Malthusian option. Or the William Godwin option is to teach everybody better manners. You can share what pie there is to be baked among as many people as there are to share it with. And that's the hardest option, but that's the one that I'm always aiming for, is I don't think we can bake infinitely bigger pies, although we should try and bake the biggest one we can.
Right.
And I would prefer not to kill anybody. So I think we all need to try to learn the best manners that we can when it comes to sharing.
Equality. Maybe there's something, that.
Or equity, better, right?
Equity,
Like, let's get everybody what they need. Yeah, let's get everybody what they need. There's also, this is from, if you know Astra Taylor's work, the book title is so good. Democracy may not exist, but we'll miss it when it's gone. There's an example at the end of the dish with one spoon treaty, and it comes from Northern California, where a number of the tribes, before they would meet to decide on the use of common spaces, so common grazing lands and other things, they would share a dish, and there was one long spoon, and everybody had to get fed, which means, and it's really hard to eat yourself with a long spoon. There's metaphors about heaven about this, right? You have to feed other people. So before you all sit down to talk about sharing the land, you share food, and you do it in such a way that people have to feed each other. And I think that there's something to the deep wisdom of these kinds of practices, where we need to think about what does it take to feed each other. And if we think about caring for other people first, we'll get our needs met, and we'll all get our needs met, I hope.
I do too, because I think that when we are obsessed in scarcity or obsessed with resource accumulation and grabbing and hoarding, we will forget others and treat others horribly. We will go towards killing others, metaphorically or physically. Whereas if we believe that there is an abundance and that we believe there's enough for everyone, we may actually find that we are all satiated.
Do you also know Robin Wall Kimmerer talks about the great saying, I save my meat in the belly of my neighbor. And I really like that one too, right? You can't save your meat, not really, but you can feed other people, and then they will feed you.
Yep. Yeah. When life is that reciprocity, it's way more beautiful and more fun. And yet we've been shaped so profoundly by late stage capitalism and resource hoarding and accumulation, extraction. Like, the stories we've been fed work against us in terms of trying to live in a reciprocity manner.
They do. But then David Graeber also, live as if you are already free, right? It's true. We can understand why we're trapped, and also you got one life.
Yeah. So you can, live a more beautiful life and share and not, but it's hard, because then the tensions we face pull us back.
And we live in the world. We live in a world not of our making.
It is. But we can aim to maybe leave it slightly better for my girls.
Yeah. For all of them.
All of them, yes. So some fun questions to wrap up about food. Is there one food you refuse to eat, or maybe won't choose willingly?
I do not love banana. I had a really bad experience with banana flavored erythromycin at 4 and threw up a lot of banana flavored medicine. And
Ooh,
but it's close. The fake banana flavor is close enough that real banana also. I'm not.
okay,
It's yeah, that's a forever one. But I don't love okra or mountain yam or Nepalis. It's that sliminess that they all
okay,
share. That
yep.
I will eat those things, but I would not choose them.
Well, then, yes, I've had to. I'm rethinking of how to ask that question because people are like, "Well, there's nothing I'll refuse," But is there something I may not willing?
I bet they're just not willing to
I
admit
know,
there's something
maybe.
almost everybody
Yes, I
refuses.
know. Yes. What's one of the best things you've ever eaten?
Oh, there's so many. Oh my goodness. Today I had the most amazing watermelon. Oh, it was
Oh,
so good. Two of them actually, because there was this kind black diamond at the supermarket, and I was like, well, I have to find out if it's better. And I
yeah,
had to pick like the best seeming seedless watermelon next to it that I could. Both of these watermelons were like out of the park. I ate like a quarter of the watermelon myself, and I'm not sad, and I might go eat another quarter of it afterwards. It was
nice.
so good. So really, I mean, fruit at its peak,
Yeah,
a ripe mango, I would eat all day, any day until I was sick.
for sure. Yes, fresh fruit at its peak. There is nothing.
Peaches.
Yes,
Oh my God, peaches.
yes,
Yeah.
yep. No, I would. Yeah, fresh vegetables at their peak. Fresh fruit and vegetables at their peak are.
Hmm. Oh,
Uh,
peas out of the garden.
mm-hmm. Or
Yeah.
tomatoes. I think my mind changed on tomatoes when I got a fresh tomato from a stand.
That's the one everybody, and so that's the one everybody brings up because that's the one where you can really tell. There are very few kinds of vegetables where I could tell in a blind taste test. Yeah,
Yeah,
tomatoes, because the commercial ones to make them firm enough to travel, they really suffer. But most produce, man, our supermarket stuff, we are so spoiled.
we are. Yes, I think peaches are great from because supermarket peaches always come so underripe that by the time they're ripe, it's hard.
If you let them ripen though, they can still now we got some
Yeah,
amazing ones from Trader Joe's earlier this summer, and then it's been months since until we could get Michigan ones.
sure. And then finally, there's a conversation among chefs about last meals, as in if you knew you only had one more meal left to enjoy, what would it be? So if Margot had one last meal, what might be around your table?
I would have a loaf of my sourdough starter, just a crusty loaf with butter and salt and an entire bottle of Chateau Neuf de Pop,
Oh, that's your go-to?
all for me.
All for you?
Oh God, it's not a go-to. That would
No,
be
no.
my last meal.
Yes, yes.
Any wine is fine for daily drinking,
No,
or weekendly drinking.
but no, we all have
But
that bottle that speaks to celebratory life, beauty, more so
yes,
than other bottles.
when I finished my dissertation at my second wedding, yeah, if I when I'm going to celebrate something, Chateau Neuf de Pop is how I do luxury.
What stands out about the Chateauneuf du Pape for you?
What is it? I don't. I think it's because that's the one I taste a story in. I think the description in Sideways that like the moment when
Yeah.
Miles is doing his like pontificating. He's not wrong. There's sometimes where wine is thrilling, and it's thrilling, I think, because you taste the age
Hmm.
somehow, and there's something about Chateauneuf that tastes like a story to me in a way that other wine tastes like fermented grape juice, but Chateauneuf du Pape tastes to me like time.
I love that. Yes, I've not had too many Chateauneuf du Papes. Like the
I
wine.
haven't either. I haven't been that.
I know.
There aren't that many times you should in life, I think.
There aren't. Yes, luckily, like again, my privilege
But
allows me
you're
to
but you're
drink.
in your career. In your
Yes,
career,
in
you taste
my
many
career.
more.
Yes, yeah, I drink way above my pay grade, and my wife and I are happy about that most days. Although there are times where like we're just tired of wine. Like, do we have to drink more
I bet.
Pinot? I'm like,
I'm having a summer of non-alcoholic beer because all of a sudden they've really cracked it. I mean,
okay,
the stuff that people are making now, I have never been a fan, but for various reasons, it's made a lot of sense to drink a lot less this summer. And the non-alcoholic beer available now, I am not sad.
okay.
It's much better than it has been for years and years. Like, except there's hazies out there, and they don't taste like a real hazy beer, but they don't taste bad either.
Oh, good to know. Yeah, we don't drink as much beer anymore. They tend to not sit well with
Uh,
me.
Fair.
I just don't feel great, and I'll have one
Yeah.
if I go out with friends, but it's not something we
Hmm.
reach for. So we're wine and cocktail people.
Yeah, I am typically too, but anyhow, it's been my
Yeah.
summer of non-alcoholic beer, and it's really not bad.
No, that's great. Good to hear. The de-alcoholized wine is still progressing. It's not.
I haven't tried any that I have liked much.
Some of the sparkling can be okay because the bubbles help. Um,
Oh, that makes sense.
and whites are
Hmm.
obviously better than reds. Um,
That makes a lot of sense.
so
Yeah. Whatever they've figured out something that where they can add some of the weight back, I think. So and they're often more caloric. So you'll be
yeah,
drinking a non-alcoholic beer that's still 85 calories. There's something like they're doing something else.
right.
Anyhow,
Yeah.
it's better.
No, it is. Yeah. Well, Margot, I've really appreciated this. Appreciate your time, your expertise, your knowledge. If people are interested in your work and want to find out more, where could they find you?
Oh God, that's a good question. You can email me. I'm at smargo@umish or Gmail, and I do reply eventually to most things. But I don't have a ton of other like things, and the only thing I'm actively working on in terms of writing and publishing is this book series that Mark and I are doing out of the University of Arkansas Press.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if any of your listeners would happen to have a manuscript they're shopping, but we are looking for it. But for food studies people who are
Yeah.
listening, if you have a food studies manuscript that you would like to see in a home with other food studies publications, so people are likely to find it, and with very loving editing from me and Mark, we are just starting off and looking for new titles. So that's the main thing I'm working on right now.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to it. So if you've enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, leaving a review, or sharing it with others. Thanks for joining us on this episode of The Biggest Table, where we explore what it means to be transformed by God's love around the table and through food. Until next time, bye.